Welcome to the NintenFusion Podcast, a podcast that fuses past, present, and future Nintendo thought. I'm David, accompanied by my friend, Jordan.
This time we're going to discuss Pokemon's return to the Sinnoh region with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl.
And it is a fun region. But yeah, let's just jump into Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl then. I'd like to start by talking a little bit about the past. So going over a little bit about the Sinnoh region itself. So Gen 4 released back in 2006 in Japan and April 2007 in North America. And back then, they added some pretty interesting things that kind of shook up the game's formula. The first thing that they did was they added the physical and special split, which was pretty controversial at the time. It made a lot of Gen 3 Pokemon seem not as powerful, with like Blaziken especially. But the physical special split has actually made things a lot more interesting, since now fighting type moves can be special based on your special attack. So then Pokemon can have much more utility and versatility throughout, the various genres. And Gen 4 was the generation to add that, a staple. It also added Wi-Fi through the global trade system. Fun fact, the games were actually why the DS received Wi-Fi in the first place. They were talking with developers of the console and said, hey, we want to do some Wi-Fi stuff. Please add a Wi-Fi card to the DS. So there's that. The games also featured 107 new Pokemon that were introduced. Many of them are fan favorites, such as, well, not many of them, I guess. Some of them are fan favorites that I know lots of people typically like, and that's like the Shinx line, the Gible line, Lucario line. And it also added many evolutions and a couple of pre-evolutions to previous generation Pokemon, such as Magnezone or Togekiss, Gallade, Leafeon, Glaceon, and multiple others. And to kind of top all of this off with all of those new Pokemon, it also features the most legendary and mythical Pokemon added to a single generation ever, with 15 additions. And the mascot trio, Palkia, Dialga, and Giratina, have been coined by the community the Creation Trio, which is kind of cool. So that's kind of the stuff that Gen 4 added back in the past. I'd like to just ask Jordan here, what are some of your memories of Diamond and Pearl? What were you doing around that time? Did you play the games at all? Did you enjoy them?
Talk about it. So I picked these games up pretty much at launch. I was a diehard Pokemon fan throughout most of my life. And coming off of the Hoenn region, which is my personal favorite, I had really high expectations for this game, which, man. So when the game first came out, I enjoyed them. And as the game kind of like lingered on, I feel like it kind of slipped to being probably my least favorite generation until Sword and Shield came out. Just because there's a lot of like really, from all the post-game stuff aside, that's a different issue. I like playing a lot of challenge runs and playing through the game itself. And Diamond and Pearl really had really rough pacing issues where there were just like huge swaths of nothing happening between gyms. The route tables were really boring. It was mostly just like old Pokemon. You didn't really, for whatever reason, Diamond and Pearl, at least at the like first half of the game, felt kind of embarrassed by its Pokédex. I don't know, because it always made like the new Pokemon the hardest Pokemon on the route to find, or such as like Hippotopus being like 2% in like the cave that you first would approach it.
Right, but it would increase randomly if you caught all of the unknown or whatever. Like it was weird.
Every single route had Geodudes and Zubats. This is probably the generation with the most Abras to ever exist. It's a lot, and it's a ton of Kanto Pokemon. And I think the reason for that is because a huge amount of the Pokemon that were added into this game were evolutions to previous Pokemon. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of muddied the Pokédex to being more heavily weighted towards previous generations than most generations have been. And the biggest issue I have with that is most of these evolutions are like post-game evolutions. Like you don't really get Magnezone
Right.
for a long time.
Well,
right?
and most of these evolutions weren't even in the Brilliant or the Diamond and Pearl Pokédex, like at all.
Yeah.
They just didn't show up until you got the National Dex.
So while it's 107 new Pokemon, a lot of those are legendaries, which are just a one-time use, and or you only see them once, right? And then
they're locked behind events,
or they're evolutions to previous Pokemon that you've used for a ton, like in the previous generations. And not only that, I think they chose a lot of these evolutions for balance reasons, right? So they were like not very popular Pokemon from previous generations, like Rhyhorn or whatever, right? And so if you're not getting those evolutions to the post game, you're kind of stuck with less popular Pokemon throughout most of your adventure, and you're not seeing much of the new stuff. Like, I don't know, man. And then it didn't help that like the generation was also, it ran so slow. It took so long to save your game. It took so long for health bars to deplete. The game like dropped frames, I swear, all the time. With that said, with all those complaints, I think Diamond and Pearl, I had Pearl as a kid. Pearl is probably my second most played Pokemon game of all time. Hoenn is by far the most, because that is, if I'm ever feeling the itch to play Pokemon, I usually just fire up Emerald. That is the one I have the most nostalgia for. But Pearl because it had the online stuff, likely was the game I played the most out of Pokemon.
Yeah, so, that's really interesting.
So I dislike it, but I also have a lot of nostalgia for this generation.
Yeah, I understand that quite a bit. But I'm kind of the opposite. Sinnoh is likely my least played region of all time. I mean, I was like 13 or something when these games came out, and I certainly knew about them, but I didn't even have my own DS until, I don't know, maybe 8th or 9th grade. And even then it was a hand-me-down from my cousin because he broke the hinge. But the console worked perfectly fine. So all I had to do was get like one of those Nerf cases to hold the sucker together so it wouldn't just like come apart. But yeah, I played through Diamond. Diamond was one I played, which is interesting, and we'll talk about this in a second when we get to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I thought that they were fine enough games, but they didn't, I don't know, hit that nostalgia or that like specialness in my mind that like Emerald and Ruby and Sapphire did. Because like Jordan, those are my favorite generation of Pokemon games as well. I loved Sapphire. I logged so many hours on that game. I would breed eggs for fun, but not even like competitively or anything. I just liked walking around the entire region. I'd get on my bike, start at the hometown, and ride all the way to the Elite Four, like stuff like that. But I just didn't really do that with Sinnoh. And then, I played Platinum later. But anyway, I mostly just remember thinking, kind of like Jordan alluded to, like, where are all of the new Pokemon? Since so many of the Pokemon are rare encounters or are hidden in single locations, like it's nearly impossible to find a Gibble.
Well, it's not actually impossible to get Gibble because it's in that cave, right? So the problem is, if you're not paying attention, you'll completely miss the cave. It's just it's hidden away. They cleverly hid it.
It's hidden under the bridge. Like that's the entrance you have to go through to get to it.
But you do need strength to get to it, which is kind of like mid game. So even then, you still have to pass it, and then so you have to like pass it, see it, and be like, I'll come to that later. And then actually come back to that later to get your Gibble. And that's why I think a lot of people missed Gibble, because you had to backtrack for it.
Right. And you don't normally do that in your first playthrough of a Pokemon game. I don't think a lot of people backtrack unless they have to, like this game kind of does. But yeah. Another thing is, like, more recently, I actually finished a Nuzlocke of Platinum this summer. I started it before the announcement of the games and then just kind of casually was picking it up every so often. So Platinum has been very much on my mind as I've been playing through these remakes. So anyway, I do agree with Jordan. They're Pokemon games. They're still pretty good, but yeah, they are incredibly slow and definitely not my favorites. But I do think the Sinnoh region has a certain amount of charm. The music is some of the best in the series. Like, by far. It's so good. I don't know what they did, but it's awesome.
I think it's once again, just to praise more to Hoenn, I think it's the second best soundtrack in Pokemon, whereas Hoenn is by far the best.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. Plus, you can't go wrong with Hoenn's excessive use of trumpets, which I love that.
Some people don't like it, but man, I can't get enough of it. But like, yeah, so like the main adventure is probably the weakest part of Pokemon, which for me is the biggest downside because the main adventure is why I play Pokemon. I'm not a competitive player. I'm interested in competitive play. I watch it and like keep up on it, but I don't want to like go build a competitive team and play against hacked Pokemon online.
See, and I go that far. I like watching competitive and I'll make teams, but then I never play it.
Yeah.
So I spend all this time doing the research and figuring out the meta, making the Pokemon, and then being like, nah, I don't really want to do it.
Yeah, I was always into challenge runs. And then when Nuzlocke came, I think Nuzlocke came around during the 4th generation. That was when people started picking up on it.
Right. Well, the 4th generation is typically also the generation where the internet became such a huge popular thing. You know, forum boards and stuff were really going around, you know, the mid 2000s when these launched. So I can see that being when the Nuzlockes came out for sure.
Yeah. So Nuzlocked the game a lot. I think as from a Nuzlocke perspective, 4th gen is probably also my least favorite. Just the route tables are so bad. Like you keep running into routes and it's just Geodudes and Zubats, Geodude, Zubat, Geodude, Zubat. It's just, how many times do you have to walk through Mount Coronet and you're just swarmed with Zubats the entire game?
Yeah, and then half of the early routes just have the same Pokemon.
So yeah,
it's weird.
The main adventure is the big weakness of this generation. The main strength was the special physical split, which I think is the biggest update to any generation we've ever seen.
Yep, absolutely agree with that.
It's actually hard to go back to gens 1 through 3 because there is no physical special split, even though Gen 3 is my favorite.
I would say that the top 3 biggest things that happen to Pokemon are definitely the physical special split, then doubles battles, because those are just way more interesting for me to watch than singles and to play. And then the split of the special stat back in Gen 2. So it was special attack and special defense rather than one combined stat.
Yeah, I'd also include the 3 different types of Pokemon that got added in with Fairy, Dark, and Steel somewhere in there. But
yeah, the type table is actually pretty balanced, even though I think that Bug gets kind of...
Bug and Ice need buffs.
Yeah. Anyway. So I guess that kind of covers, you know, the past, our experiences with Diamond and Pearl, and I guess their Platinum improved version. It's not a sequel. But now let's talk about these actual remakes. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl actually launched about 2 weeks ago from the time of this recording. And we've both had some time to play through it. And interestingly, I'm playing through Shining Pearl, even though Diamond was my first one, and Jordan's playing through Brilliant Diamond, even though Pearl was the one he played the most. Isn't that right?
Yeah. I think it's part of that is because like my opinions have changed. When I was a kid, I thought Dialga looked dumb. So he just looked way too busy. So it's not that I liked Palkia, I just hated Dialga. And then afterwards, Mystery Dungeon came out. And that changed my view on Dialga just because he has such a good theme song. So now I prefer Dialga over Palkia, even though I'm not really attached to either of them still.
That makes sense. I like them both, but I like the Weather Trio better. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about some of our impressions and review about these remakes. I kind of wanted to start with visuals, if that's okay with you. Let's talk about the art style first. So this has been a little bit of contention for some Pokemon fans. Either you really like it, you're not a big fan, or you're somewhere in the middle. So, I mean, wide a range of opinions. But the game, at least in the overworld, is a chibi art style. Now, I have to put out a disclaimer here that yes, all of the sprites and models from generations 1 through 6 are technically stylized chibi. And so in a way, this kind of like builds upon those art styles. However, I am not a huge fan, especially when they zoom in. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I don't think it's chibi style. I think it's Funko Pop style.
That's a good way to put it.
They look like bobbleheads.
Yeah.
Like, you could say, like, the previous generations were chibi, and yeah, sure, that's fine. But, like, man, the head is just so much more exaggerated in this game than in those generations.
Yeah. I'm also just really not a fan of the cutscenes in this game when they're saying the exact same words with the exact same text boxes as Diamond and Pearl. But then the camera will just like zoom in on them a little bit. And the camera zoom is honestly really awkward, the motion that it makes, where it does like a kind of like float up and then a quick zoom in. You have to experience it to understand what I'm saying. I don't like it.
I think it's hilarious because, like,
it's
here
funny.
you have Cyrus being like, I'm going to, like, end the world and destroy all time and space. And he's like this cute little Funko Pop that's just blown up on the screen, and you just can't take it seriously at all.
Yeah, I mean, you got a point there, but like compared to, I don't know, like Sun and Moon's cutscenes, they're so weird. And I know Sun and Moon didn't have any emotion on like the protagonist, but I feel like this is worse. But I mean, at least the models in battle actually look pretty good. I think that they all look really great. And I kind of wish that they had just redone the overworld and scaled it so that they could just look like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, it's kind of ridiculous that the third generation remakes look like, I don't know, newer.
Yeah.
I don't know what the best term would be, but they look like better games than this one. The art style is not very interesting at all.
Yeah, it's super generic. I don't know. I know a lot of people really think it's cute, but I think they could have done so much better with it. Anyway, we don't have to keep talking about the art style, I guess.
I'm not too. I don't really care either way, to be quite honest. It's just whatever. If they want to be more in line with the original, that's fine. My big issue with these games is because they wanted to be in line with the original, they didn't fix any of the issues I was saying earlier about, like, the original games, right? They fixed some issues. They made the HP bars normal speed now, like how they should be, instead of taking 10 years to get down. Aside from that, the route tables are the same.
Yep.
You're still the pacing is still the same. It's easy to get lost because there's a lot of backtracking, and they don't if you miss like one line of text and just like these giant blocks of text, then you'll just like have no idea where to go.
Yeah. I mean, at least you can pause the game and the bottom of the map will say something like, go to this city or continue exploring this city or something. But
I didn't even know that.
Oh, yeah. If you pause, literally on the bottom of the menu screen, it'll give you a little update on what you should possibly do.
Well, that would help.
Because I mean, I know how to play these games. You know, I played through Platinum literally like 4 months ago, and I still was like, what do I do now again? And so when I realized that I could just pause and, there's a little update, that it was helpful. But yeah, everything is just buried in text. And these games are honestly like, I don't want to say non-linear because non-linear implies, gameplay like Breath of the Wild. But at least there are points in the game where you travel and you have to like backtrack through routes and go different directions in the region, rather than like Sword and Shield, where you went from town 1 to town 2 to town 3 and like never really went back anywhere.
Yeah, but you do a lot of backtracking, but it's just backtracking to another linear path, right?
Right.
So it's not really, I don't know. And on top of that, I feel like they balanced the game with the intent in mind for you to have it not be linear. But so, because like the third gym, her strongest Pokemon is level 30. And then the fourth gym, his strongest Pokemon is level 30. So you would think that ideally it was supposed to be like an option of choosing this gym or that gym, but you can't. Right. You have to go to the third gym and then you can go to the fourth gym because there's a bunch of people blocking the path to that other town for no reason other than just to keep you on a linear path.
Right. But like Gen 1, and I hate to be that person, but you could actually do gyms in different order. If you went exploring to different towns, you totally could. And yeah, it does feel like they maybe wanted to do that with these games, but then just didn't. Anyway, but that kind of brings on some more interesting things about like gameplay things, especially when it comes to controls. How often did you hit walls and get stuck on corners?
Anytime I bring out the bike.
Yeah,
I'm just running
the
into
bike
walls.
is the worst.
Because it has like this slow start and then just like starts going. And because you're not locked to a grid, you just like fly into things at a diagonal. And then like you can't even like interact with objects at a diagonal. Like that, I think that drives me the most nuts. I come up to like an item and I can't select it until I like move to the grid to go collect it.
Yeah, it's bizarre. The way that the game just handles controls in the overworld just drives me nuts. But at least you can do really tight circles on the bike and get step counts really, really fast. I don't know if you've noticed that.
I have. I've noticed step counts in general are absurd in this game. Like your repels are just thrown away like candy.
Yeah.
Eggs just hatch like immediately.
Yeah.
Friendship is like maxed out like by the time you get to the next town.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's like the game is counting steps based on what grids you actually cross through rather than the actual total distance. Because in Sword and Shield, I know that it was based on the distance that the bike actually traveled, not based on some grid system itself. But It seems like in this game, it's like, oh, if you just barely clip the corner of this one grid, it counts as a step.
That would make sense. And if you're going diagonal, it's probably like increasing it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I literally caught a Chansey, and by the time I got to the next town, it was a Blissey. It was
crazy.
It was absurd.
That shouldn't be allowed, and yet it is. The controls are wonky. I just don't feel that they're polished like they should be. Like they were like, this is good enough. I should not be clipping so much on corners and getting completely stuck. Like literally stopping me in my tracks. There should be like a smooth glide or something to keep me from just stopping entirely. But whatever. I did also kind of want to talk about battles for a minute. They're very similar to Sword and Shield. Like the actual mechanics, that hasn't really changed since, I guess, Gen 6 with the 3D models. All of the battles have basically looked exactly the same. The menu looks identical to Sword and Shield, which I kind of like. They did a pretty good job with the UI for battles, I think. Except, and this drives me insane, I cannot figure out, or it's been taken out, how to view current stat changes and revealed abilities, like a summary. You could like look at the second screen in Sun and Moon and you could see like those up arrows that would tell you like how many stages your Pokemon's attack has been increased, for example. Or in Sword and Shield, you could press Y and view a summary of the battle, because that would also tell you like how many turns it's been for weather abilities or how many stat changes you have. I can't see that. And that has been such a useful and good quality of life improvement since Gen 7. I don't know if that has ever bugged you.
I don't need
You
it.
don't care.
I just remember.
I mean, I can remember, but I'd like to double check,
Yeah.
Like, is my accuracy low? If I'm not paying attention, that's a problem.
Well, and like this game is missing just a lot of just random quality of life features, right?
Right. It added some, like, being able to view your boxes pretty much anywhere, but took away a lot too, I think.
To be honest, I haven't played a whole lot of Sword and Shield, so I guess I haven't really gotten too invested to some of those quality of life changes. I played through the adventure once, and that was basically my entire experience of Sword and Shield. I was not impressed. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people don't like it when people talk bad about Sword and Shield, but it wasn't the game for me.
I'm in the boat that the Sword and Shield story is really boring. I think that the lore is interesting, but they didn't do enough with it. The town layouts and the route layouts are way too simple, but I do think that they are the best games when it comes to collectors and for competitive in the whole series. But if you're not into either of those things, then yeah, they're really lackluster games. Anyway, this isn't about Sword and Shield. We should continue talking about Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. One other question that I've seen, especially for newer players or players that never played Gen 4, is if these games are easier or harder than their originals. And it's hard for me to say based on my own opinions, since my first playthrough is a Nuzlocke. I believe yours it was too. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got wiped by Lucario. Lucario's Drain Punch was nuts. So I'm on my second run right now. And I'm on the 5th gym, I think. Yeah. So I haven't gotten to Cynthia yet.
Oh, okay. I haven't been wiped yet, but I have lost some Pokemon because, yeah, I think that a lot of the Pokemon are harder. I think especially the gym battles. And I know that they're harder, at least from a numbers standpoint, because data miners have dumped all of the encounter tables for battles. And gym leaders have pretty good IVs and EVs. They're not like maxed out because they're just gym leaders. But the Elite Four are nuts. They gave the Elite Four fully competitive IVs and competitive EV stats plus held items and really good coverage moves.
Yeah.
So they're hard.
Yeah, I've been looking at some of them and they look pretty nuts. Like giving Melodic I forget the name of it, the burn orb or whatever, so that its stat or its defense stat is increased by 50%. And on top of that, burn has been nerfed in this generation, if I recall correctly. So
I think so. But yeah, no, they're hard, at least from a numbers standpoint. For casual play, like if you're holding on to 6 Pokemon and you're going off and you're not avoiding any battles in the routes and you're, defeating everyone in gyms and stuff, you'll probably be fairly over leveled when it comes to some of these battles. So it's kind of balanced more in your favor in that regard. But if you're doing any sort of challenge run or you're playing where you're doing a rotating team of 12 where all 12 need to be around the same level, you're doing a Nuzlocke or a hardcore Nuzlocke of some kind, then you're probably going to struggle, especially with some of the harder fights in the game. So there's that. However, I will say that the Fairy type edition does make some fights possibly better if you manage to get a Ralts or a Togepi for a Togekiss and Gardevoir. Cynthia at least will be less of a challenge with her Garchomp. So there's that. But yeah, another thing I wanted to talk about, Jordan, is bugs in the game. Not bug type, I'm sorry.
You got me excited there for a moment.
You can talk about bug types for a minute if you want. I'll give you a minute. Go. They only added, 2?
Yeah, we got no new bugs. And they once again split Scyther and Pinsir for me, so I can never have my full team of... And they made... And Heracross, of course, is like super rare in this generation.
Yeah, only 2 of the trees in the entire game and they're random, can spawn Heracross.
But I have Kricketune, which has the best cry in all of Pokemon, so I don't care if it sucks. It's always on my team.
Or however it goes.
Anyway, those weren't the bugs you were wanting to talk about.
No, but bug Pokemon are important to you, so I wanted to give you the chance. So I'm going to preface this by saying, unfortunately, some of the biggest bugs I'm going to just mention were actually patched yesterday in an update. So don't update to 1.1.2 if you want to hold on to any of these. The first bug, and this is the biggest one and has allowed the speed run of this game to be 23 minutes, is menu storage. So menu storage basically allows you to open the menu inside a menu, which does all sorts of weird things to the game, where you can like move around the map while the menu's open, which makes it so that you don't have any encounters with wild Pokemon or with trainers. It also lets you skip dialogue with scripted encounters in that way. And it also allows you to do some weird warps where you can literally just jump to the Elite Four and beat the game. That bug was patched yesterday. It took them about 2 weeks after it was found, of course, but it was patched. It also allowed some interesting things like being able to clone Pokemon and items incredibly easily, like literally an entire box of Pokemon in 10 seconds. And a couple of other interesting things. There are movement issues with doing puzzles, especially the diagonal movement. You can even clip out of bounds in a lot of places, and people have been using that plus Surf in the Void to get to like Shaman's Island, which should be an event that will get unlocked eventually, so they could shiny hunt that Pokemon. Same with Darkrai, even though the Darkrai encounter has made it so Darkrai doesn't appear, but his island is still there. And all sorts of things have been incredibly buggy about these games. I've seen some speedrunners and Pokemon researchers say that these games are the most broken and buggy Pokemon releases since Red and Blue. I don't know.
That's a big claim, because Red and Blue were a mess.
Right. Like, they're not saying, Red and Blue allows arbitrary code execution. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl don't, at least yet.
Yeah, the quality assurance of this game feels really low compared to like the standard of Nintendo in general, right?
Yeah.
Like my favorite is the video of like the Ekans walk animation right now going around online, where it's just like coiled up and like moves around like a Roomba.
Yeah. Which is hilarious because Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee released, 2-3 years ago now? Ekans walk animation is fine. It's like actually slithering like a snake.
Yeah. I don't know how that got past. Like who? Whatever.
Who tested the walk animations for everything? I'd like to have a word with them. But anyway, these games are such a buggy mess. And the crazy thing is that the update yesterday really only fixed the menu storage bug. It didn't really fix anything else. Maybe a couple of the areas where you could clip out of bounds, but they haven't fixed the Ekans. They haven't fixed any of the like puzzle problems as far as I know. Yeah, it's interesting. I know that the menu glitch is huge, that they had to fix that, but it's still like, okay, come on.
So is this the first time that a Pokemon game has been made outside of GameFreak? Like an RPG Pokemon game?
Yes.
So the XD, Gale of Darkness, and Coliseum, those were both GameFreak, right?
No, those were Genius Sorority, I believe was their name.
Okay. So this is the second time. All right.
Yes.
Man, this game actually makes me kind of like, we've been saying forever, oh, Nintendo should allow more studios to make Pokemon games. This game is kind of making me question that stance, honestly.
I will say though, in defense of that argument, because I still think that they should, the studio that made this, ILCA, which stands for I Love Computer Animation, apparently, and the Japanese studio that made these remakes, they are not a huge company. Their initial start was with creating computer animation and graphics for like movies and commercials and stuff. And they have never developed their own game before, ever. They have only helped with other studios. Like they helped with Nier Automata, or Automata. I believe that's how it's actually pronounced. I don't know. I haven't played the game. And a couple of other kind of RPG games there, but only with some of the visuals. So this is basically their first project for such a huge franchise, where they actually were helming the development.
Yeah.
So,
man, all right, Nintendo, can you please get like a AAA studio to make a Pokemon game someday?
Yes, please. Or at least allow GameFreak to finally hire more people.
Yeah, make GameFreak into a AAA studio.
Yeah.
Because right now they're not.
No, they're not. And they're expected to pump out games at a schedule of a AAA studio.
So yeah, I guess, man, I don't know. I'm pretty disappointed with with this remake, to be honest. I didn't even have high expectations going in because, once again, Diamond and Pearl is not my favorite generation. The game's fine. Like, it's still Pokemon at its core. Like, I'm playing through it. I'll still play through the whole thing. If you've never played Diamond and Pearl, this is probably the best way to go about it. I don't even know if I could really say that with a straight face, because Platinum was actually pretty decent as a game.
I mean, a lot of fans have been saying that these should have just been Platinum, but with like the Diamond and Pearl splits. And I agree with that. Like,
well, by Diamond and Pearl splits, you mean just the legendaries, right? I think the route tables need to be completely uprooted and redone.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, some of the benefits from Platinum were like actually giving you access to some of the better Pokemon earlier. Like routes is actually a fairly common spawn in one of the routes, and a couple of other things that they tried to fix with.
To be fair, routes is another symptom of the issue, though, where it's an old Pokemon that got a new
true
evolution this generation.
Right, but I mean, they at least tried with Platinum to fix things up. I do agree that the route table should be completely redone, but like, it just feels weird that they regressed back, because Platinum did have a few quality of life improvements, like trying to rebalance things. They added the entire distortion world to make the story more interesting. The gym puzzles were actually a lot better, not as broken. And there wasn't a weird math puzzle where you just have to do basic like arithmetic. But anyway, as for like kind of looking forward, I hope that Game Freak and the Pokemon Company look at these remakes, and a lot of the comments that those of us that were hoping these games were better than they turned out to be will take that. We know they won't, but take it and try to improve remakes in the future if they're going to do it. I remember you talking to me. I think we were just having a discussion about like how you wish that some remakes were more like sequels to their stories. Was that right?
Yeah.
You want to
So,
talk about that?
we were talking, and I was saying, I know a lot of people are going to get angry when I say this, but I think Kanto is more deserving of something than Sinnoh is. And I know a lot of people are going to freak out because Kanto gets apparently a lot of love in people's eyes, but we haven't had a true like Kanto remake since third gen, right? So that's even older than Sinnoh. And yeah,
Right.
Let's Go Pikachu exists, but so like you have like the nostalgia generation just not being as up to date. Actually, I'm going to retract that. I don't think it's more deserving. I think it's like in the same tier as deserving as like the Sinnoh remakes, right? And so we
Okay.
were talking like the problem with a remake of Kanto would be that would be really boring because Kanto is kind of a boring game now. It's really outdated. It's got a ton of issues. If you're going to do a faithful remake, honestly, the Let's Go games are probably the best you're going to get out of it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would really like is kind of like a sequel where you kind of return to the area. And since kind of all the previous generations, maybe not so much Gen 3 and Gen 4, but those first four generations feel pretty small in scope compared to the newer generations. I would
Mm-hmm.
like kind of a sequel that is all four generations kind of combined since they're all supposed to be pretty close together, right?
Right. Especially since they're all based off of different islands of Japan.
Or even just doing like interesting projects. I think Legends Arceus is the correct way to go with a remake of not a remake, but a revisit to the Sinnoh region. Because like the reason why we want these remakes, it's not really that we want to play the same game over again, right? It's because we enjoy these regions and we want to go back and we want the Pokemon that were the spotlight of that region to be in the spotlight again.
Mm.
And Arceus is doing that for Sinnoh. And I think so because of that, I think Arceus will hopefully be the better return to Sinnoh than this was because it's a different project in that region.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So if we were to ever return to another region, I would kind of like that approach. Like, say, if we ever go back to Unova, I don't know if I need Unova itself. We could do, I don't know, an area closer to it. Unova is actually kind of a harder one to think about, like what you can really do with it, because that one is a lot more story focused than other generations.
Yeah, for sure. But I totally get what you mean. You know, revisiting the region shouldn't come at like, or revisiting the region shouldn't imply that we need remakes of the same game. I do really like that idea. You know, it was all fun and games like back with Fire Red and Leaf Green. You know, that was exciting because it was like, oh, cool, I get to play through the Kanto region in the same basic engine as Ruby and Sapphire, you know, and that was magical to me. I loved playing through Leaf Green. I thought it was the coolest thing. Even though it hadn't been very long since Gen 1 had come out, it was just still super cool. And then Heart Gold and Soul Silver knocked it out of the park. They are still probably like the best mechanical Pokemon games. Like I know people have their favorites, but I would argue that Heart Gold and Soul Silver are possibly the best made Pokemon games of all time. And then Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were special to me because it was kind of like I was getting back into Pokemon again because it had been a few years since I had really even cared about Pokemon, and it was a return to my favorite region. But I do think, you know, after being a fan and following along with so many games, I've played all of them, literally all of them, every version up until now, at least a couple of times, that I'm at the point where I would like to revisit the regions and do something new in them. You know, whether it's a new set of characters, it takes place 20 years in the future, or thousands of years in the past. I agree. I think that Legends Arceus is a great step for revisiting beloved areas, and I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope that it's good.
Yeah. And a big thing that one of the big issues I have with a lot of these remakes is they remake the game or whatever, but they kind of like pretend the future games don't really exist, at least for like the base game, right? They focus a little too heavily on like what was already made and just trying to just update that to today's standards.
Mm-hmm.
And I have made there are new Pokemon from newer generations that I would like to see get mixed into those route tables.
I agree. Absolutely. There won't even be the ability to add any of these Pokemon into these games when Pokemon Home finally gets the ability to connect to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. The game is literally capped. There are no assets, no data for any Pokemon beyond Sinnoh. Arceus is the last one in the table. So you can't even bring them in to like wander Sinnoh with them as your buddy or something. So it's just weird.
Yeah. Well, now this is the third Pokemon game that to not have the complete Pokedex up to that generation. So
yeah.
And I think Arceus is also going to be the same way. I think they've already confirmed that, haven't they?
Yeah, Arceus is not going to have a ton of Pokemon from what it seems. But it does have interesting like Hisuian variants of like Unovan Pokemon, which is cool. There's a Hisuian Braviary and a Basculin evolution.
And so that's kind of like what I was talking about, right? Like going into like these side projects where you're just returning to the region, you're able to bring like newer gen Pokemon into the experience, which
I agree.
I prefer.
Yeah.
We'll talk about whether or not Arceus is a good game or not. I am leaning on my speculation is it's not going to be a very good game, but I am appreciative that GameFreak is actually trying something interesting with it.
I agree with that. So we will for sure do an episode of the podcast about Arceus when that comes out in a couple of months. So look forward to that.
It's not a couple of months. It's next month.
Well, yeah, but the podcast episode might come out in like 2 months. We may want to spend some more time with it. You may actually end up loving it. Blah, blah,
I'm just saying, it's a lot sooner than it feels like.
Yeah, true. But let's go ahead and wrap up Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl with like, kind of final review scores based on what we've got. Honestly, like I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I know this is a shock for a lot of you listening. If you've listened to our previous episodes where we've done like 9s and 10s for the last games we've talked about. But this is such like a middling experience for me that I don't even really feel like I need to finish it. There's nothing exciting for me. Even as a Pokemon collector, I'm not that interested in hunting any shiny Pokemon at the end of the game. Sword and Shield are way better for that. And I played Platinum over the summer, and this just feels like that again, but now on my Switch with, I guess, HD graphics. I do think that they're a success for what they do. They are faithful remakes. They do, they're a lot of fun. I know a lot of people are enjoying them, but I just think that, ILCA, the studio behind it, just, they didn't really take the source material and improve it. They just kind of spat it back out on the Switch. And that's kind of where I'm at. So a 6 out of 10 for me.
I think a middling experience is kind of like the best way to view it. I think the games are fine. If you really like 4th gen, it's fine. I don't even think if you really like 4th gen that you're going to be super stoked to play it because it's still, while it comes with its new set of issues. But if you already have a Switch and you just want to play a Pokemon game, you're not going to have like a bad time playing it. It's just not doing anything to go above and beyond and be an interesting experience or addition to the franchise. So I think 6 out of 10 is where I would put it as well. Like, right. It's fine. You can play it. You can enjoy it. It's not going to be the greatest thing ever.
Right. And then just so you know, listeners, our review scores, we're not trying to be like, oh, an average experience is actually an 8 or whatever. We're trying to actually make it so that 5 is an exact average video game so that we do have a more wider variety of scores than, other publications or whatever might do. So a 6 is still pretty good. It's a pretty decently made game and it's fun based on its core, but it's just not incredible like Metroid Dread was, for example. So anyway, I think that wraps up our discussion on Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, but we have one more quick little topic to talk about. And Jordan, why don't you introduce it?
Yeah, so the Game Awards, I believe when this episode comes out, I believe the Game Awards are just like a few days afterwards, right? It's on the 8th, so it's about 6 days away. So next Wednesday, and this comes out Sunday.
Something like that, yeah.
I think so. I might be wrong. I might be getting the dates wrong. Anyway, there were a few Nintendo nominations, and then I just realized that I forgot to put one on here. because when I was looking at the nominations, I was searching by just Nintendo as a publisher. But I forgot to put Monster Hunter on here for RPG. Anyway, so Nintendo got a few nominations, or at least Nintendo exclusives, and we got Metroid Dread is being nominated for Game of the Year and Best Action Game.
Let's go.
And then, of course, the Nintendo Award, Best Family Award, which is dominated by Mario Party Superstars, New Pokemon Snap, Bowser's Fury, and WarioWare Get It Together. And then, of course, the exclusive Switch game, Monster Hunter Rise, I believe was nominated for Best RPG. If I remember right.
That sounds right. I'm not sure, but
anyway, I just want to quickly talk about like kind of what we're kind of expecting out of these nominations. Metroid Dread getting nominated for Game of the Year is very exciting. It's one of the highest rated games of the year out of all publishers.
Absolutely. And it's really good, and you should listen to our episode on it. We talked about it a lot and gushed about it a lot.
I would be stoked if if it actually wins.
Oh, it'd be incredible.
There's a feeling of dread in my heart, though, that it's not going to get it.
A feeling of dread. I don't know if it'll get Game of the Year. That tends to go to, I don't know, not Nintendo games unless it's Breath of the Wild. But I do think it has a good chance at action. So
it kind of goes to single player focused, adventure story driven games that are AAA made, right?
Right.
And 3D adventures, I should say. So like Metroid being 2D, I think is going to really hurt its chances. I think, which is unfortunate because Metroid Dread is phenomenal and it shouldn't be dictated by whether you're 3D or 2D. But I think Deathloop is going to steal this show.
Which I haven't even played, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, it got nominated for the most amount of awards. It fits like the exact kind of game that the Game Awards would normally do.
Yeah.
So, Dread, I hope it takes Game of the Year. It only got nominated twice, which isn't a good sign for it taking the win. Hopefully it takes Best Action. That'd be really good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
As for the Nintendo Award, I think it's kind of ridiculous to see WarioWare here. Listen, I love WarioWare. WarioWare is a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with this new one. It is a game made on someone's lunch break in a broom closet. It is.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone describe a video game like that.
It's a very productive lunch break, okay? But I'm very excited for WarioWare. I think it would be kind of insulting to the other 3 Nintendo games that got nominated if WarioWare took it.
True. I mean, out of these games, I think Bowser's Fury is probably the best of them.
Ow. So my other issue with Bowser's Fury is that it's not even a remake. It's a port, right? With like additional content put on. It's like a DLC pack getting the win. And Mario Party Superstars is just a stapled together like remake, right?
Right.
I think this should go to Pokemon Snap.
I think it should too, but I just get the feeling that Bowser's Fury is going to take it because it's just a streamlined Mario.
The other game that got nominated for this, I believe, was It Takes Two, which got nominated for Game of the Year. So I think that's going to win the award.
So Nintendo's not going to win the Nintendo award after all?
Nintendo's not going to win the Nintendo award. But if Nintendo were to win the Nintendo award, I think it should go to Pokemon Snap because Pokemon Snap was actually really good this year.
It really was, and it was really fun. The game looked beautiful. It's the best looking Pokemon game ever, and I had a lot of fun with it. So I'd love to see that under Best Family.
So and then of course I'm for Best RPG. My personal hope is for Cyberpunk. Just because I want to see like the entire internet go into meltdown and like like riots in the street because I think
you're so chaotic.
Yeah. Also, I love Monster Hunter, so that would be great to see it win too. But no, I'm on the sidelines cheering for. I don't know how Cyberpunk got nominated.
But we'll have to see. We'll probably do like at least a segment of a future podcast, probably the next episode on how that went. Especially if Nintendo won anything.
So our next episode should be we'll quickly talk about the Game Awards. We won't dwell on it too long because there's not a lot of Nintendo awards on it. There will probably be some like new stuff announced at the Game Awards. I'm hoping something good from Nintendo. Please, Metroid Prime remake.
Yes, please.
But and then I think next time we'll also go over our Game Awards for this year.
Yes, that's always a fun thing to talk about. So we'll have that ready for you. And with that, I guess that kind of wraps up this episode, unless you have anything else to say.
Nah, I'm good.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of NintenFusion. We talked a lot about Pokemon and about what we think will happen with the Game Awards. Just as a couple of reminders, some end business here. The podcast is live pretty much everywhere, so please give us a review if you enjoyed the podcast on whatever app you're using. It helps new folks find us, and it helps us get better at what we're doing here. We'd love to, get some of that good old feedback to improve the show. You can also find all of the platforms and our various social links on the anchor.fm/NintenFusion website. That's where our podcast is hosted. We're working on our own website for a couple of other little things, but that is, again, anchor.fm/NintenFusion. We've also got a Discord server, so come to nintenfusion.com/Discord to join us and talk about Nintendo stuff. Let us know what you think about Pokemon. And with all of that, I guess we'll just end it here. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See ya.
Bye.